Oh, we're live.
Hey, everybody.
So, hi.
Live.
So we were just discussing before we went live who introduces whom. So I think
What's the
this is
etiquette?
going on. This is going on our channel, but these are the guys that I learned to brew from. So this is James of Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing Video, and Steve of James Acquaintance.
Where's that?
He's also of Basic Brewing Radio.
Yes,
Basic
no,
Brewing Radio.
Yes,
Former
he's been-
owner of
well-
StevesBrewShop.com.
Former,
Yes. Yes, indeed. And my frequent consultants in my home brewing days, and some of the best home brewing mead makers I know.
Oh,
No,
so
it's true. I've had
I don't know how much you've tasted of our stuff, though. That's
I've had 3 or 4 of them. We all sat in a hotel room in Baltimore, Maryland. one
That's
time
right.
Yeah.
I
together.
was going to mention that. Okay,
Yeah.
now, do you mind if I give you a little history?
Please.
And I just realized I'm not recording on this. So okay, now I'm recording on the audio side for us. I'll fix it later. I'll fix it later in post.
The production values around here are stunning.
That's right. KORN Radio. Now, we first met in person in the back of the Home Brewery in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Yep.
Do you? This is a quiz for you. Do you remember what year or how many years ago it was, Steve?
I do not, but I'm going to take just a wild guess. It's a very wild guess. And I'm going to say 2009.
Oh my!
Nailed it.
Did I really?
Yes, you did.
13 years ago this month.
Get out of town.
We gathered in
Yep.
the back of the store, and the topic of the show was unusual ingredients or found ingredients.
I remember
and-
the show.
And among the things, Ricky brought a Gruit inspired beer, which had hops in it, which so I say Gruit
Old.
inspired.
Old hops that I had found at the homebrew shop, and they wouldn't even sell to me.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
They just gave them to me.
I would have sold him.
And anything, anything for $1, Steve.
Yeah.
And then there was also a Metheglin Braggot, which was
Mhm.
big, and I went back and listened to the show. I liked it a lot. You and Andy were kind of iffy on it, but I think that and you'll
was
have to give us
young.
an update after a
was young.
year or two. I bet it was way good.
Yeah,
And you-
it
and
was,
you
it was
had-
only like 3 months old at the time.
And you had
And I
sent
expect-
us a Dandelion Kolsch and another beer that we tasted on the video.
The Dandelion Kolsch is what I remember of all of them.
And then in 2016, we met again in person at HomebrewCon in Baltimore. And that's when we met Kelly.
Mhm.
And that's when we first tasted Groenfell and Havoc Meads. And, I was like, what are these going to be? Ricky's kind of impulsive. We met him in person. We tasted his stuff. And it's like, are these going to be, he was a fun home brewer. Are these going to be like, good, delicious commercial meads? And
Right.
we were blown away.
Yeah.
We'd never had these craft meads, fairly low in gravity, sessionable, carbonated in these wonderful cans. And it was just like a paradigm shift for me, that mead could be like that. And then now years later,
the
you're
steadying. I was gonna say that's the steadying influence of Kelly on me.
Yeah, I could see that. And now years later, y'all are sponsors of the radio show. So it's all
Right.
it's all coming around in a circle. So that's the history of where we are today.
And so you were supposed to have some of our mead there, but UPS did not succeed.
Well,
I assume they
hopefully-
will eventually.
Hopefully, there's not a thirsty driver on the side of the road quenching said thirst.
But I believe you have some of your own meads, and over here I actually dug out a bottle from, I don't know if he's watching, but Rob Frizzell is a local award-winning mead maker, and before he moved across the country, he left us a whole bunch of gifts of his home brews, and
Oh, wow.
we've been slowly going through them. And I also found something that I was pretty certain did not exist. I have a 2017 bottle of our winter warmer, the first time we ever made and packaged it.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I'm allowed to drink it on air because we're lightly staffed today, and everyone else is going to want to try it. I haven't seen one of those.
I thought you were afraid of driving the forklift or something.
Oh, our forklift is not operable as of yesterday. We had to unload. Yeah, we had to unload a bunch of 50-gallon drums, and by the grace of like, quickly turn the key, pull the thing up, everyone stand back. We were able to unload the 2, and then it went to sleep and will not charge. So no risk there. But anyway, so I have a homebrew. I have a cool new product that Sean, actually, he is our sales guy. In his first week working for us, pitched this idea to me, which is super bold. Like, to just stroll into a place, and be like, and he was super respectful. He's like, I have this idea. There are a lot of people out there who have never had mead. And there are a lot of people out there who have had mead. And that's also a problem because I can tell you my first homebrewed mead, if that was the one and only mead that my friends had ever had. Ooh, there we go. Our first question was the first mead you drank. Okay, so the first mead I drank was the first mead I made. And luckily, I tried again. It tasted like the water that forms on the top of a sourdough ferment. It was not good. I put in no nutrient and insufficient yeast. So went down that path pretty early on. And then second batch had that briny flavor that it took us about 8 years of research to figure out what we think is causing it. But yeah, it was undrinkable. And one of the problems that we talk about with our sales team is, if someone has a bad beer, they assume that person who made it is a bad brewer. If they have a bad mead, they assume mead is bad.
Okay.
Because if
that's a very good point. I think that's true. I ran into that a lot when I owned the store and would try to talk to folks about mead. A lot of folks around here keep bees, so there's a lot of people that would come in and say, "Well, I think I want to try to make mead, but I bought a bottle of this stuff. I won't name it, but it's kind of sold everywhere, and I didn't like it." They would tell me, and I would say, "Well, mead doesn't necessarily taste like that." But you're right. But the assumption was that mead wasn't good. That's a very good observation. I never really thought about it like that before.
Yeah, I think that the first mead that I tasted was either mine or yours because we started brewing at about the same time in 96,
95 or 96.
Yeah. And there was a mead kit at the homebrew store, and we made. Luckily, our first batches of mead were successful. I'll get my elbow.
They were. I think yours was better than mine. I kind of remember this. I remember that I left mine no nutrient, and the packet of yeast was a little packet of dry yeast that just said yeast. I mean, who knows? But I left it in the carboy for at least 9 or 10 months to a year before I bottled it. So, but I remember drinking it and thinking, this is not. Well, I don't know. It's like you get into the hobby and you think, oh, this is alcoholic. It wasn't great, but it was good enough that I kept going.
Right. And that's what I tried to tell people. So I worked at a homebrew store for years as well. And I say, like, hopefully your first beer, you put a lot of attention into it and you're like, wow, I did it. This tastes like beer. Because after that, you're going to have a bunch of swings and misses. But if you have just like 1 or 2 under your belt, and I mean, the biggest thing that it's changed over the last 10 years since I've been writing and recording, but this idea that mead needs lay it down for 5 years and trying to figure out, first of all, hunt down where that came from. And I think I finally figured out it's as simple as the fact that most of the mead was made without nutrients.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that in Ethiopia and in Finland and in South Africa, they're drinking mead 6, 7, 8 days old. That's perfectly normal for beer as well. It's just that a lot of the mead makers out there, especially the home mead makers, came out of the wine world and had wine thoughts in their heads. Whereas I was lucky enough to come out of the beer world. I was like, there is no reason that we can't apply all the the last 700 years of technological advances to this. Temperature control, for one thing,
right?
Absolutely.
Like that. Right. Makes such a difference. I have a batch going right now. Our sours go at 94 degrees.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
yeah, a lot of sour yeasts like to be at that temperature, 94 to 98. And once you get to 98, you're likely to clock over to 104 and kill that yeast. So if you have a fully outfitted brew house where you have a glycol chiller, or if you're as small as a home brewer and have a dedicated fridge where you can control it, it's great. But, just 40 years ago, you couldn't have made a mead like that without it, putrefying.
Yeah, I think both of our first meads were carbonated as well.
They were
primed in the bottle, and they're very, very champagne-y, very dry. And we made batches of mead for some friends' wedding, and I remember sitting on their patio drinking mead with you and thinking, do I want to make beer again? Because this is so good. It was so light and, like I say, fruity and champagne-y, and we were very lucky to have got some good honey. And I don't even know where the honey came from or what it was.
Probably Walmart, who knows,
or anything.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is if you just took a bottle of Welch's and made wine out of it, you probably wouldn't end up with an extraordinary award-winning wine. And people go and they buy the clarified honey from the grocery store, and that's the first one they use. I was a Costco honey user for many, many years until I started buying it.
And some people add a bunch of sugar, to their. I want this to be powerful. Will this get me?
Oh, that was our favorite thing. When I worked at the homebrew shop, they would say, like, "Oh, how do I get more alcohol in this beer?" Yeah. And our answer was, put a shot of vodka in it.
Oh, there you go.
Right? Like if that's your goal, you're probably in the wrong hobby. And I mean, we've all done it, gone on that IPA train where you try to see if you could do like an 11.8% triple IPA. It's part of the sport, but.
Oh yeah, you got to do it. In fact, a couple of years ago, I did that, and I did it because I just wanted to see if I could. And so I ended up I made a 16% apple mead or apple. Oh. Well, it's a wine or a mead. It was mostly dextrose. I mean, I put like 8 pounds of dextrose in this 5-gallon batch with some honey, and I made it correctly. The fermentation was good. It was a clean fermentation. I still have maybe 5 or 6 bottles left. It's strong. It's so strong I can't get through very much.
We made a 19.2%, and we sold it one time. And then I was like, first of all, I'm gonna have blood on my hands. It tastes strong, but it doesn't taste like half of a. I mean, that's Jack Daniel's just watered in half, right? Like that's a lot. And even I made the mistake. I had a keg of one of our products after a festival we did. I just brought it to the house because it was a pump tap, so you had to go through it or else it spoiled. And I should have just sent it to a local distillery because I was totally as bad as your average 45-year-old dad at a Red Fair. Like I had 3 glasses of it. And I was like, what the hell was I thinking? I do this for a living. I just sat down and read. I like put the kids down for their nap and I read Dune and drank water for the next 2 hours. So dumb.
Right.
Which is why. Ooh. I'm going to throw this one over to you guys.
The question is, which recipe is your favorite to suggest to new brewers? And I would say, I'll go first.
Okay.
Maybe something like what I've got right here. It's a segue into this mead, which is just honey and water and nutrient and yeast. And so do you want me to go over the recipe?
Yeah, we also have all of our recipes are free on our website.
That's right. Yeah, go to groenfell.com.
Oh, nice.
So we're open source, and Valkyrie's Choice is the one that I was going to say, which is honey and water and nutrient and yeast.
Yeah. Now this is made with local honey from Caleb the Beekeeper, which we did a feature on the video podcast. We shot some video of him and did an audio interview with him as well. This is 2 pounds, 10 ounces, or 1.19 kilograms of local honey. And it came out to be 2 gallons or 3.7 liters of water with 5 grams of this proper nutrient from Omega that we got for free at HomebrewCon. And used a packet of US-05, Safale US-05, original gravity 1070, final gravity 0.998. And I was in a little bit of a hurry to bottle, so I didn't rack to a secondary. I kind of wish I did because it's a little powdery on the bottom. But I did. I did prime.
Cloudy, but not. Yeah, go ahead.
I did prime in the bottle. So I thought at the time, I'm going to prime it in the bottle, so there's going to be sediment anyway.
Right.
But it's a little powdery, as opposed to yeast sediment, which is, more of a solid. It's more flocculent.
Yeah.
Now this is, I halved the batch. Half of it is just plain. Half of it I put flavored with some tinctures, which I'm not going to say because when we do the video show eventually, I want Steve to guess. So this was bottled on the 30th of July. Now it's August 5th. So I don't know if we'll have any carbonation yet or not. And Steve is unfortunately not able to sample today.
I'm flying dry
because he's on antibiotics. It was that wild weekend in Newton County.
That's right.
So you can smell it, but it's not fizzy.
No,
it's not even. It's the yeast is not even waking up yet.
You're 1070 down to 998. It's
9.5%. 9.5%.
I was going to say, yeah, that's a lot for yeast, especially US05 hanging out in a bottle.
Looks pretty.
So
it's gorgeous.
Showing the camera. It's a little cloudy.
I'm going to get in trouble from Sam and Jess. I forgot to grab.
Oh, you guys are killing me here.
You got to smell that.
Oh,
it smells really good.
Found my daughter's water cup from lunch.
That was great.
Cheers, everybody. Happy Mead Day tomorrow, by the way.
Yeah, yes, it's Mead Day Eve. And then it's Mead Boxing Day. And then
and the Mead New Year will start next Saturday.
Actually, Winter Warmer, which is sitting right here. I'm still tempted to open.
So Steve, while we're sampling, what recipe would you suggest for a new?
Well, I mean, the basic ingredients are the same ones that you guys would go for. And the only thing that I might suggest, only to make it a little easier for you as someone on your first batch, would be to maybe make a small, what we as homebrewers would call a small batch, maybe make a 3-gallon batch. So you don't have a big investment. And I would suggest shooting for about an 8 to 10% mead. Don't go into it with the idea that you're going to make, this giant alcohol bomb. The fermentation is much harder to get right, in my opinion. It takes a lot longer.
Especially without that temperature control. You're so likely to get fusels. Yep.
Yeah. And I wouldn't worry about, I wouldn't not make it in the middle of the summer in Arkansas. But if you decide to make it in the late fall, it might be easier to get a good fermentation. And then I also might suggest using a beer yeast. I know that, why I use wine yeast a lot, but I really find that I really enjoy where the beer yeast stops. And it leaves me with that nice. So my only point is that I think if it's your first batch, you're not quite sure what you're after. But if it's my first batch, I want to taste honey. I want it to still taste like the ingredient that I put into it. So if I dry it out to the point that I kind of lose that real fruitiness, that real honey note of it, maybe I don't want to use 71B wine yeast in there. Maybe I want to use US05 or Capri, which is what I'm using.
Oh yeah,
in the batch I've got going. So I actually have a 3-gallon batch of local honey wine. 3-gallon batch with, I think, I can't remember exactly, but the mead is designed to be a 9% mead, and I used Capri, which is the new blend from Imperial
hybrid.
Oh, got it. As you say, I don't know this one.
Well, it's a hybrid farmhouse mead. It blends an English ale yeast, which they call juice, and
Kvike.
And Kvike,
the Loki.
Loki, yeah, Kvike yeast, and so they've blended it proprietary. It's not just pouring 2 patches in, but at any rate,
they put on the Barry White music, and
that's right.
I did learn that yeast theoretically can sexually reproduce, though most of it's asexual body. Who knew?
Yeah, they like flowers. So
there's a recent episode of Basic Brewing Radio, shameless plug, where Dr. Matt from Imperial, Matt Winans, told us about how they actually kind of stress out the yeast.
Yeah.
such that they go into this sexual reproduction as opposed to.
It's exactly like freshman year at a small liberal arts college. Yeah.
You stress them out.
And then
you put them together.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say that I want to brag on this mead. I can't wait for you to taste it, but it's
just being cruel.
Even though, it's really good.
Well, my pharmacist put fear of God in me because he said, "Don't even take mouthwash."
Yeah.
I'm like, well, okay. I guess what you're telling me is the truth.
Yeah.
And I want to finish my little answer, and then I'll let you talk.
Okay.
I want to finish my little answer on the first mead to make. I would also answer it in this direction of what's the first mead not to make.
Oh.
Which would I wouldn't try to make a fruit, a melomel the first time out, unless you have some really good guidance from someone who's done it for a while.
Yeah.
And because once you introduce fruit, you've got so many more variables. It changes the complete. I just wouldn't do that your first time. There, I'm done.
So this
I was going to throw in another thing. The really strong mead, really light meads are also like super low ABV ones. That's one of the things we'll talk about today. Is I have something now at 4%. I would not brew something that light for the first like 5-6 years as a pro mead maker because there's nothing to hide behind.
Right.
That's why as homebrewers, the hardest thing we could try to brew is a Bud Light. It's almost impossible to replicate a Bud Light. And the same thing is, you get your nutrient load ever so slightly off and you can taste the particulate. The
uric acid or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's this pocket of time. Even though it finished out at 0.998, it has a nice, substantial mouthfeel. It's not astringent. It's not watery at all. It's sorry, Steve, but you'll have stuff. But it reminds me very much of those first batches of mead that we made. It's very simple. It's lovely honey flavor. It's a little bit fruity, and it's wonderful. So good job, me. And I hope that the yeast wakes up and gets enough energy to carbonate the batches. If not, it's okay. It's all right like it is.
And that's the nice thing about mead. It's also forgiving in a way where people don't have the same expectations, which can help or hurt you. But you give that to one of your friends and they're not like, this beer is flat. They'll be like, oh. And that's another thing about getting that first batch is honey has a whole bunch of aldehydes in it and esters that are produced with normal fermentations. You could do things to clean them up, but it has a flavor potentiator that is a specific flavor potentiator like vanilla has, making things taste sweeter than they actually are. So when you make a very strong mead that's very sweet, it doubles down on the sweetness and it's so cloying. Whereas, you're below, we actually, our products finish out at like 994 and we had to reprogram our canning line because it weighs all the cans as they go through and ethanol is lighter than water. So it was like, this can must be low. It weighs less than a can of water. And it was shooting them off both sides of the machine. We had buckets catching them. But at 994, I've got these new spritzers that Sean came up with that just came out like literally this week. And even though they're 994 and 4.2% alcohol, they still have perceived sweetness to them, which is just a wild thing about working with honey.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you for selfish reasons, to talk to you about these new spritzers. You have the honey, the cranberry lime and the cranberry apple spritzers. First of all, is this you going after the hard seltzer market?
I don't go after anyone. I leave this building and I go to my home and I come from my home back to this building and my children are with me all the time. So Sean goes after markets. Jess, who does our e-commerce, she goes after markets. I just make stuff and drink a lot. And I do a lot of mopping. I actually have a t-shirt that says I'd rather be mopping, which is what all pro brewers should have on their chests at all time, because that's what we signed up for. So I get to pick my challenges at this point. So Ancient Collection was a huge challenge for me. I had done strong meads in the past, but we really never had any interest in getting into the honey wine market. So there are no strict guidelines, but there's a poster behind me. That actually isn't. That was an accident. Kelly's just like, just put something on the wall. But there are tons and tons of different types of meads. You've got your melomels, your hydromels, your cophaemels, and all these subclasses, capsicumels, metheglins. But we roughly, just so people understand what they're picking up and drinking, use the term craft mead, honey wine, and strong meads. And strong meads would be like your dansk mead, some of the German meads out there, and
the Polish meads.
Yeah, a lot of the Polish meads. Yeah. Yep. And then in the middle, I, at one point when I was still a home brewer, I could trick someone into thinking a mead was a Chardonnay. And that's a great gag to pull. But if someone is going to the store and grabbing a bottle of Chardonnay, they're not going to grab a bottle of mead that tastes like a Chardonnay. Right. And we had always talked about how this is just like not a market that we would even want to compete in. And a lot of smaller, if you're selling at farmers markets, it can be a great in. So if you want to go pro and you're going to be doing those small batch things, being like, it's like a wine, but made from honey is a fine pitch if you're talking to the person. But so making the jump over to ancient from craft was like so everything we do in the craft area is 7% and lower. And now I'm at like 14 to 16. So it was relearning all of those homebrew strong mead techniques that I had learned, back when I was a home brewer working at the shop. And then with Spritzer, it was a really new challenge for me because we don't clarify. And I was like, it has to follow all the rules of our company. We don't sulfite and sorbate anymore. We did early on just for extra insurance, but like it's got to be clean, dry, and flocculate out naturally so that it's got clarity in the can. And I canned it last week, and I'm going to be pouring it live. I don't know if it's clear coming out of the can. But yeah, so like when this was presented to me, so I also finally got three small fermenters, just 100 gallons each. And I finally feel permission to play around. It's about 500 bottles per, but I'm bringing back something we had only at our mead hall. So in our old restaurant, something that was really popular, just didn't have it, didn't have the ability to make a batch that small. And then I was telling these guys before the call, I'm going all in on the breakfast wine category. So I made a Mocha maple mead that is just finishing out right now. Even though we're open source, I'll be open source about this one after it's done, because just like Steve and James do to each other, I'm going to send you guys a bottle, and I want you to figure out what I did to make this thing happen. And I don't want you to know yet, because it has a secret ingredient. Sounds fun.
You might want to call it a brunch mead. That way.
Everyone keeps telling me that.
But people drink cocktails at brunch. They don't feel guilty about drinking, a screwdriver or a Bloody Mary at lunch, but breakfast, unless you're at the airport.
We have to have cantaloupe with it.
Jess and AJ both suggested that to me, but the thing is that it's not funny. It's a fact. Okay. People do drink brunch meads, but I'm in the breakfast mead category. It's got coffee in it. It's got maple in it. This is for your 6 o'clock. One of Autumn, who works all throughout the company. She's if you've ever had anything from our ancient collection, she is the artist that drew the bottle. There's a good chance that she is the person that packs the bottle. She also works with me in the packing room. She also, if you follow us on social, those are her goats that mow our lawn. Like, she is all the things. And she and I both get up and do farm chores at like 5:30. She's about 2 hours from here and comes on up. And so she's more animal farm chores. I'm more squashing potato beetles farm chores. But it's 8 o'clock. I was a competitive rower for years. And I remember I'd like get back from practice, be freezing cold because I rode in Vermont. So I literally had like clothing freeze to my body. And then I'd go to a class, and then I'd go to breakfast, and then I'd want to have a beer. And my friends would be like, it's 11:30. You're drinking before noon. And I'd be like, I've been up for 6 hours. Yeah. So anyway, breakfast mead, it is happening. I just pulled a sample out of the tank a few minutes ago. It's awesome.
We have a question, and
yes.
I do want to. We got derailed from the Spritzers, but I want to get back on that eventually. But we have a question from a Facebook user. What is something you want to see from the mead community, pro home scene? What do you want? What do you want to see? Well, Steve, let's throw this to Steve. Steve hadn't talked in a while. What do you want? What would you like to see from either professional or home mead makers?
A glass in my hand would be good. But more seriously, I don't know. One thing that I look for. So if I go to a liquor store, and I always look to see if they sell mead, and I always look to see if they do. What are you selling? And I find that I enjoy those kind of 9 to kind of like my first answer, those 9 to 10 to 12% meads that don't knock you down, that aren't too cloying, that aren't too sweet.
Wine-like,
but without that wine-like, but I don't know, softer and rounder. Maybe I don't know how to answer that. Yeah, me too. But there's a meadery in Pratt, Kansas. And now I can't think of their name exactly, so I'm not going to say it.
There's also a meadery in Central Arkansas that I haven't tried their wares yet, but exciting.
This one, I love the mead they're making, and they do an elderberry mead, and they do it in three. They do it as a sweet, a semi-sweet, semi-dry, and dry that they call it. And I think, and I really love that. It's basically the same flavor profile. Mm-hmm. But the amount of residual sugar and I'll call it jamminess, for lack of a better word, changes at every strength. And I really,
that's interesting.
I really like that approach. So I kind of like the idea of playing with the same palette, but seeing how it's different from a session. I'll call it a session mead, 7-8% version of the same mead at 13%. That's interesting to me, and maybe not as so much as a drinker. It's interesting to me as a brewer or as a maker. Yeah.
Now, some of the for me, I'm thinking back on some of the shows we did years ago with Tim Lieber, who Tim, if you're listening, you said you were going to send me some meads and we were going to talk. So just a little passive aggressiveness toward Tim Lieber. But if you remember, Tim sent us selections of mead made from different honeys.
Yeah.
And we were supposed to guess, which honeys went with which meads. But that was a real eye opener because the difference in flavors between the different varietals of honey was just amazing. Same recipe, same ingredients as in honey, water, nutrient, yeast.
Yeah.
But each of those had wonderful characteristics that really accentuated. I've had some mead this morning on an empty stomach, but they accentuated the terroir, as you were, of the different honeys. I'm going to start talking less now.
I was going to say a lot of homebrewers love to do, and that's a weird segue. What I was going to say, even before, what's your favorite varietal of honey that you have tasted?
Yeah, Facebook users. What's your favorite varietal? You're going to have to start talking all the talking, Steve.
You've had like a third of a glass.
I know, but I haven't eaten anything today.
You should have had a
me
breakfast.
Neither.
I know, yeah.
I haven't had food since 6 p.m. yesterday. Anyway,
diving in. It's Friday.
Well, what I was thinking about was a lot of home brewers. I think you should play around with those varietals. If you have an interest in going pro, pick one honey and see what you can do with it. Really back to what Steve was saying. Pick that Costco honey and trick it out. Learn about yeast, learn about water, learn about nutrients. But pick a wildflower honey and just go to town. Raw makes a difference. I wouldn't say it if it didn't matter. There are things in raw honey that act as natural yeast nutrients and can make a much healthier fermentation. But of the favorite varietals, and I should also answer the question, what do I want to see from the mead community, pro and home, is the homebrew community is super mutually supportive. If you've got a problem, no one rags on you. No one tries to bring you down. It's amazing. And in the pro mead making community, I have always experienced the same thing. There might be like the one person out there that's feeling super competitive that day, might say something snarky, but it's been 10 years in the industry, and I can still call a dozen other professional mead makers and say, I'm having a problem with this. What would you do? And
Good
I'm
answer.
up in Vermont, where the beer community is still like that. And there was a study done. This sounds like a tangent, but I'll bring it right back. That there are two places. There are two commercial enterprises that do not function like they should, according to economists. And it is food trucks and small breweries, because we should see each other as competition, but we don't. You go to a place with 12 food trucks. It was actually run in Austin. It's Austin, Texas. There are 12 food trucks at this location, 18 food trucks at this other. And rather than seeing each other as competition, if your oven goes down, someone will spot you an oven in their truck. And a lot of these guys and gals, they will hop trucks on their one day off. You're short labor. There'll be a cutter for you. There'll be a sous for you. These tiny little spaces. It's hot. It's exhausting. I got to tell you, we're not as brutal as a beer brewery. I'll admit it. Like I don't shovel grain anymore, and it's the greatest blessing in my life. But if Stowe Cider, right down the road from here, we have the same kind of can ends. You probably never noticed, but it says what states you have to pay a deposit on your can end. Yeah. And it is legally controlled, and meads and ciders don't have the same deposits as beers. So I can't run to a local brewery and get the can ends to close my cans. And I had to get 6,000 gallons out in 2 weeks, and our order was delayed by a week. So I called them, and at cost, they sold me their can ends, and we loaded up the trunk of my CFO's car. She was driving past. We'll go with that's why. But that level of mutual support, as the beer market is for craft is currently shrinking, which is weird, but hopefully that won't last. I'm still seeing that level of mutual support that I hope exists in our industry forever. And the theory is because we hang out. Yeah. All these food truck people, you could, if you work at a Burger King and never go to a McDonald's, you could see McDonald's as an enemy. But if you're a food truck vendor, you see each other all the time. You have shared stories. You know what hell it is to be at a galley kitchen that small. And all these beer brewers are struggling with the same things. And as long as we keep talking, that is what I want to see from the mead making and professional brewing community going forward. It's going to be tough as competition feels like it will win, but I think we can keep it up. Drinking together has always been a powerful force.
Collaboration. That's an excellent answer.
Well, and when the boat rises, when everybody's boat rises, everybody's better off.
Yeah.
It
is an ill wind indeed that does not blow someone a drink. Okay, I did it. Okay, so it's condensation. Hold on.
There you go.
What do you?
Okay, I did it.
What did you get there, Ricky?
It's clear. I did it.
Oh, is that the Spritzer?
It's the Spritzer.
Oh, I'm so excited and jealous.
Yes, yours is coming later today.
Well, usually the delivery people come before noon, and I was hoping that they would be coming up on the front porch here. But the fact that they haven't come yet means that it'll probably come maybe Monday. Tomorrow, maybe Monday. But supply chain or something. I don't know.
Something like that. So answer to the varietal question, blueberry honey and coffee honey are without a doubt my two favorite honeys I've ever had. Coffee honey is like $22 a pound, and that's lovely. I'm sure that there is a mead maker out there that could make a world-class one-of-kind beverage out of it. I'm not good enough to work with honey that's that expensive. I'm proud of my work, but man's got to know his limits, and that is clearly mine.
That's a small batch.
Yeah.
Now, I was trying to think back on those. I need to go back and listen to those episodes with Tim. But I remember the Mesquite honey standing out as an aggressively flavored honey that I'm not sure that I liked, but it was just like, oh, wow. Yep, that's Mesquite. And I'm not a fan of Mesquite wood as a smoking material because it's just so sharp, and I'm used to the sweetness of the hickory or the apple. But the fruited one, the fruit honeys were my favorite. But there was a wildflower. There were a couple of different wildflower honeys of the same. It was like the same flower in different regions or something. That one was remarkably different from the other. It's just you need to go in the archives on basicbrewingradio.com and find those episodes and sample vicariously with us. But honey does make a difference, and you need to make sure that your honey is real and not reconstituted, sugar added crap, frankly, from somewhere, and just make sure that if you can get local honey, if you know a beekeeper, and you can get honey that's local to your area, like this is, it can be wonderful. But yeah, and good honey is sometimes worth some extra money.
Well, it's like computers, garbage in, garbage out. But I would say, as far as varietal, I don't know. I haven't tasted everything that I'd like to. So I've never had. Well, I have had acacia honey. I remember I did make a mead with an acacia honey one time, and it was really good. But I would say, just as advice, I completely agree with finding a local source of honey that came right out of the hive, and you kind of know its complete custody chain, you might say. And so it's fresh. So to me, the variety of honey isn't so important at my level as it is that I know the honey it has been made locally. Or do you make honey? Do bees make honey? I don't know what the right word is.
Bees make honey.
Bees make honey.
Collect it.
Yeah, that's right. So that would be preferable than worrying about whether it's orange blossom honey or lavender honey. I'd rather have a good local source of wildflower honey or clover honey that I know is raw and healthy. I guess I don't know how to say it.
It seems like there was an agave nectar in there, some agave honey in there as well that was really, really good.
Yeah. One of the nice things about being a home mead maker or home mazer is that you can afford $22 a pound honey sometimes. And, if you just, it's a hobby. And, hobbies aren't meant to be cost efficient, by nature. I like to fly fish. It's a really expensive way to catch a fish. But I love it. And same thing with making mead and beer for that. Well, actually, beer's cheap.
Yeah, and this local honey was not cheap.
Right.
And Steve and I compared costs. When I heard from Caleb, what the cost of his honey was, I texted Steve and said, "Is this right?" And he said, and then you told me, some pricing you got on some other, but I was only buying a small amount.
Right.
And Caleb is a good guy, and he's a young guy who's a go-getter who, cuts hives out of people's houses, and he's a hard worker. And I'm like, I'll support that, and especially because it's delicious and it's literally just down the road from my house. So I'm not a professional mead maker. I don't have to buy hundreds or thousands or whatever pounds of honey that you buy every year. So I can be extravagant, and
we actually
make a 12 pack.
We use more honey than the entire state of Vermont produces in a year. When people ask, why don't you buy locally? I'm like, because people wouldn't sell it to me, and even if they did, they would then run out. But for our special ones, still for our sours,
you're like the Walmart of
if you send a drone up off our roof, though, you can see where the honey for our sours comes from, because that's where I want the wild yeast with our local fruit. So we switched to working with all small farmers for our fruit supply. So do
you keep honeys there at the meadery?
The hives, we do not. We've talked about it. We can't keep them at this location. We don't think, but the town has been pretty permissive with us because we're a B Corp. So we have an international standard we're held to for social and environmental equity. So we may be able to convince them, because they are not holding us to the standard lawn mowing for the rest of the business park, because we're like, look, wildflower conservation, blah, 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 our mission, and then goats. Like, who's against goats doing your lawn? But
they're the greatest of all time.
It's the cutest. Good one. I would not have gotten that joke 3.5 weeks ago. Someone told me what that was.
Goat sounds like a bad thing if someone tells you.
You're the goat. Okay, Ricky, I am in California.
This is from Jess.
Well, I was going to say, Jess, I know where you are. Avocado honey at the farmer's market. One for you and one for me. That's not a question. It's just a fact, but thanks.
That's a small batch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, what's up, Chris?
You want me to read this?
Ooh.
And my of course, I can't.
No, let's
my
see.
glasses are.
Oh, right, you and your bifocals. I can read it.
Chris says I'm racking my brain on doing a coffee mel and cannot think of a fruit that hasn't been done with it. Do you guys have any ideas of a combo you would find interesting? Maybe we should define what a coffee mel is.
Coffee mel is any mead that has coffee at any point in the fermentation. So some people, I actually often used to do my primary fermentation on the coffee. So there's a thing known as yeast stripping, where your yeast will take flavors out, which is why things are often like flowers or subtle spices or like strawberry. It's usually added in the secondary. But coffee has so many harsh elements, it's not a bad idea to have a little bit of scrubbing happen on it. But in this batch I'm doing right now, coffee went in secondary because that's when I thought to do it. Also, shout out to our friends at Run Amok Maple right up the hill here in Fairfax. They're available everywhere. They ship to the entire US and possibly the world, and they make some of the best maple syrup on earth. This isn't me as a friend of theirs saying it, literally top rated maple syrup on earth, but they do cool infusions. So they have like lavender syrup and coffee syrups and cinnamon and vanilla ones. And for the low cost of, please get this out of our walk-in, we're able to do collaborations with them with maple infused ingredients from them. So this Coffee ML that I've been talking about is going to be with them. So a fruit that goes with it that hasn't been done. That's I don't know I assume everything's been done, but I've hardly ever had a coffee ML with a fruit. The only one I've ever made was a coffee chocolate cherry.
That seems like a good pairing.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but I can't think of, I mean, you could go really off the wall. I would suggest doing coffee and a really, really fruity pepper. That's the first thing I thought of that I don't know that I've certainly never had. Something like, we can't go down the like Ricky's nerdy pepper path. I have like 14 different ones going with that. And Steve, you're a pepper guy too, right?
Well, yeah, I was, I'd never thought about this before. I've never had a coffee mead before ever in my life.
Okay.
So I need to. But I would think a chili like a guajillo or an ancho, something kind of smoky, little cigarish.
I did an ancho mead many years ago. It's my favorite. It tastes like raisins and so good. Yeah, that's the direction I would go. Or if you wanted to pick something like one of the Italian peppers young, like a Calabrian or a lively Italian, while it's still got that green fruity flavor before it starts to really pick up its heat.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to go like a dried one, like ancho guajillo, those I've used both of those in brewing before.
I think
they were actually in Fire Break.
Ricky's nerdy pepper path was my favorite section of Candyland.
Those little spice candies that got so popular in the 90s and aughts. Just a dude in a flannel shirt with big hair being like, go back. It's not going to be popular for 2 more years.
Facebook user says, is there a type of ingredient that you love or hate working with?
It's so different between being I'm still a home brewer. So like I have really different answers depending. We actually switched on this one. I'll tell you the one that we actually quit using.
Ooh.
because it was such a bear to work with. And it was oak chips. Getting oak chips back out of a 2,000-gallon conical fermenter that has just had mead in it, which means it's now full of CO2. I was the only person on the staff that was able to go in after them because I could hold my breath for 2 minutes. And also my wife and I own the place, so I can't sue me. But
don't do this at home or in a professional environment.
No. So anyway, we told your OSHA,
your OSHA certification.
Yes, we are a full. Actually, I'm the only person that has enclosed access certification in the company for this reason. But we don't do that anymore. It's just such a bear. But as like a home brewer, oh my God, oak chips all the way. Like just put them in a little bag, drop them in the bottom of that bucket. It's, oh my God, it's the easiest. So that's the first one that comes to mind that we just quit using it. So if you are a home brewer or really thinking about scaling up, there's an amazing company out there. It's a father-daughter team, I believe. It's called something like Swan Barrels. Ricky at Grenfell.com if you really do want the actual answer to it. I think I even wrote an article about them, but they make these staves where they cut a honeycomb pattern in them so that you have maximum surface area. So it means that you can use woods that you couldn't actually make a barrel out of. You need a special type of wood that doesn't have pineal holes or twisted fibers, which would allow the liquid through. So you can use things like birch and beech and ash, some of which you can make barrels out of, but you can get these flavors in your mead and they make homebrew sizes. So if you wanted to play around, so that's what we use now. And you zip tie them together. So you could reach in and pull wood out and you pull this long chain of wood out of the tank. So that's what we do instead of oak chips now. But that's the one that I just couldn't stand working with. And the reason I'm a mead maker is I like working with honey and I detest shoveling grain. Because when it's done, you have an empty bucket or an empty drum or an empty tote and you rinse it and you are done. As an avid gardener, I do miss the grain for compost, but still not worth the shoveling. Grain is the one thing I'm glad I'm not allowed to and don't have to work with. So sending it over to the home brewers who work on a different scale.
Well, I think, and I think working with honey is fun. And that's one of the reasons I like mead, because honey is such a fascinating thing to me. You know, how the bees make it, how it's collected, how it tastes. It's a wonderful thing. And so I like working with honey.
Yeah. And you've most definitely worked with more ingredients than I have as far as flavoring, especially on the mead side. You're like, kitchen cabinet guy. Hey, well, you know what else would be good? Because you have a professional culinary background, and you're like, hey, you know what would pair well with this, and this, and this, and this, and like your Turkish light mead, which had all kinds of different things, including maybe was that the one that had a rose water?
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah, I think so. And on that particular mead, I was remembering my time when I lived in Turkey for a while, and I was thinking of those flavors. And
you were serving in the army. Thank you.
That's true.
Seriously, thank you for your service.
You're welcome. At any rate, I was remembering the flavors of the food and thinking, how can I bring that into mead? And then that made me think about a direct answer to this question is I like working with saffron.
Oh, yeah.
I really love to work with saffron. It's a hard ingredient to work with because it's so powerful. If you don't, it's hard to control. I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. But if you get it right, it's wonderful. If you get it wrong,
I made a saffron mead. It was the mead that I pulled out at a party in 2012. And it was when Kelly said, okay, we can do this professionally.
Oh, yeah.
It was the mead that she's like, you did it.
Wow.
Letting me work with such an expensive ingredient. Again, just home brewing at the time, finishing up my master's degree. But it was the mead that we pulled out. And my friends and Kelly said, all right, you two, we go do it. Go move back to Vermont.
That's awesome.
Start
a great story.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, no, a Turkish delight mead. That's fascinating. Do you have any of it left?
No, it was long gone, but I want to make it again. And it was very popular. I gave a lot of it away to friends and family that I was impressed with myself, and it came out well. But it was basically an apricot mead in apricot melomel, and then flavored with saffron and rose water.
Yes, you're definitely going to need that recipe.
It
My
was
dad,
really good.
yeah, my dad and I are
you were
huge-
asking about Ricky. You were asking about a possible collaboration. Maybe that's
that
the
could be the
collaboration.
one.
Yeah, yeah.
So
it was great.
My dad and I are both big fans of British literature, and my dad finally had Turkish Delight, which appears in all his favorite books when he went to England, and he's like, "This is terrible." Like, totally, it shattered his childhood dreams. Like, why does Edmund in Lion the Witch of the Wardrobe go crazy for this stuff? It just tastes
Turkish Delight is usually a candy, right? Or but I think you named it in homage of the ingredients.
It was actually Sultan's Delight.
Oh,
and
okay,
and,
all right, my mistake.
And Sultan's Delight is also the name of actually it's an eggplant dish. Eggplants are very popular in the Middle East, and so the name didn't quite work, but the name was funny and good, and and all that. But
you're right. I'm remembering now.
I was going to say that only the rose water really tracks through to the Turkish Delight itself, but all of a sudden, I love this whole thing.
The Sultan's Delight. Change your channel to Sultan's Delight.
And the other thing is that Middle Eastern, like baklava and all the very similar desserts, they're really sweetened with a honey syrup. They're drenched in honey, so it makes sense that making a mead with that flavor profile, you wouldn't. I can't imagine a pistachio mead right now, but pistachios and honey and rose water and orange water and saffron, those flavors all are beautiful together. And if you can nail them inside of a mead, wow, that's
we were gonna do a hazelnut coffee mead, and we just realized we have really, really good cleaning and sanitizing protocols. Obviously, we're a commercial facility. I don't want to be that guy that has to put on his can of mead, this mead produced in a facility that processes nuts. Yeah. So there's the one reason. So as soon as you said pistachio mead, I was like, I had something like that. So James, is there anything other than everything that you like or dislike?
Here's an off the wall. I'm going to say vodka is something that I've been enjoying lately in making
tiny glasses,
in making tinctures for our tincture sampler series and this upcoming mead thing, but using vodka or a neutral spirit to make tinctures. And I usually take like half a cup of vodka and then put a fistful of whatever I'm extracting the flavor from, and that way you can dose post fermentation flavors into, even at serving time. Theoretically, you could have a party, you could have a bar set with little cups of tinctures with the little pipe, flexible plastic pipette, and people could dose that, make their own little beer or mead cocktails sort of out of the thing. And I think that is a wonderful opportunity to control very precisely your flavorings, especially post fermentation. And if there's an ingredient that's like messy to work with in the fermenter, and you're worrying about trying to get it out of after, either after fermentation or during packaging or whatever, make a tincture and then dose that on a small scale in a glass, and then scale that up. And then put it into your mead or your beer. So I'm going to say a favorite ingredient that I've been working with lately, I'm going to say vodka.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Good answer. And also we've been experimenting with local distilleries to make a honey-based spirit. And my big absinthe garden is finally getting used. So speaking of infusions, I've been growing all the ingredients for absinthe for 4 years, just waiting for someone willing to make it with me. So speaking of very potent tinctures, 82% alcohol. I'll read this one.
And we missed it. Sam, we missed the previous one. I'm sorry. We get.
No, it's just a compliment.
Oh,
you
nice.
got complimented.
Okay. Oh, well.
No, it's not just a compliment. It is a compliment. Is there a fruit / spice you have always wanted to put into a mead, but have never been able to get? What and why? Mine is fresh cloudberries. Oh my God, Chris, you have no idea. And they just don't grow in the States. They do not grow in the States. They actually need a latitude that puts them in a region of Canada that cannot support them. So they need a certain number of hours of daylight to temperature ratio that only in the Scandos, Finland, even Iceland can support them. But yes, cloudberries I've never been able to get. I actually can't get lingonberries on a scale for our commercial facility. I have 4 tiny little lingonberry bushes out in front of my house. They're about yay big right now. And I have these delusions of grandeur that I'll just propagate them out and I'll eventually grow my own lingonberries for my mead. The one I can't get because of weird import laws is I can't get fresh cut heather from Scotland. You can get it as a home brewer, but once it comes in at a commercial level, it needs what's known as a grass. It's generally recognized as safe. And because of the fungus that grows on it, which gives it some of its character, it's often sterilized before shipping. And it means that even though the fermentation would kill whatever it is, and there was this theory that it was psychoactive, but it's not. I had an amazing heather mead over in Europe, and we just we can't grow it here in the same way. So those are mine: lingonberries, cloudberries, and some other Scando fruits, and elderflower. Sorry, not elderflower. Heather.
Cloudberries sound something that Lumpy Princess would have. Oh my God.
Mine isn't all that exotic, but I have a fascination with blueberry meads, blueberry melomels, and I've made a number of them with varying degrees of success. Some came out really great, and some are okay. None of them have been dumpers for sure. But I have this fantasy of like going to the north of Maine or somewhere and gathering my wild blueberries and fighting off a bear that wants my blueberries and making mead with that.
You don't fight them off. They're scared. I read a book, a documentary. It's called Blueberries for Sal. And the bear is old enough to be scared of humans. So don't worry.
That's good.
It won multiple Caldecots. It's definitely true. Oh yeah, Blueberries for Sal. It's a darling book. But yes, go ahead.
To check it out. So just the idea of I just have it in my mind's flavor profile that these little wild blueberries would have so much flavor that it would be so different than commercial blueberries grown in the South. And so that's kind of my fantasy fruit to work with.
You can get frozen wild blueberries at
and I just haven't. I guess
mega store down the street.
And I think whenever I've seen them,
likes those,
but they're not. I didn't collect them.
Oh, yeah.
I
collected them from the freezer at the.
The anthocyanin level of an actual fresh wild picked blueberry can be 4 to 6 times higher than blueberries grown outside of Maine or outside of their wild growing region. Meaning,
for those who may not know what that is,
anthocyanin.
Of course, Steve and I know exactly what that is.
It's the compound that the plant kingdom can grow to turn things blue and purple.
Oh,
and so
yes, of course.
So like if you've ever seen a blue tomato, so indigo blueberry and indigo apple have incredibly high anthocyanin levels, and it's I'm sure there's, if you Googled that series of letters, they'd be like the health benefits of. But what's cool is grown under the environment that is Maine, which is simultaneously highly acidic and super stressful, but blueberries love it. It develops a really high level of this. And if you were to go and pick, you're absolutely right, Steve. Your mead would be purple. It would be so incredibly blue. It's just really cool. And they really do. Starts with W. I can't remember, Weidmann's, something like that, have wild picked Maine blueberries, and they're darn close. But having led hiking expeditions through some of the islands of Maine and having my shins torn to pieces and all of that you clearly never walked through a blueberry patch. It's not briars, it's brutal, but you just get to lean down and eat them, and it's almost worth it. All the bleeding, but
we have blackberries around here, and that's that the thorns and the chiggers.
Yep. We have
we're growing Cherokee purple tomatoes.
Ooh,
and of course, every time that Susan says, "Oh, the Cherokee purple," I break into song. Cherokee purple. That narrows the age group of that's right in our demographic.
When I was
I actually was thinking of a song almost 40 years older than that one. So there you go.
Whoa.
Anyway.
Well, when I was a kid, I lived in Colorado, and we would go up in the mountains, and I think there were I think there were wild rose hips, and I would pick them and eat them. And luckily, nothing I did that with was poisonous. But at any rate, I remember these little, little dried little rosy things. Mm-hmm. So I think they're rose hips, and that would be something that I would
do your research before you forage.
Yes, for sure.
Public service announcement.
But I remember that as a child, just this question brought that popped that into my mind, and I would think, wow, if I could go up and pick enough of those to get into a batch of mead, that would be great.
Shameless plug.
Oh,
shameless plug. We are launching.
Well, it's not so shameless since it's on your channel, but go ahead.
No, I stopped doing Ask the Meadmaker when we started selling online. I just couldn't handle the idea because it had always been like, we don't get any money from it. They're not, whatever the thing where Google throws ads up, monetized. And I was just like, I don't want to be out there having people watch me and then go like, hey, go to Grenfell.com and buy our mead. It was just such a weird transition for me. But we are doing a huge collaboration. Just like this is a year and 2 months in the works. There is a very, very, very cool company. They're based in Sweden, and they have axes on their website. We're doing the official announcement next week, and I don't know if Jess and Sam are going to get mad at me for giving things away. But so if you want to figure it out, they're a very cool company. And they are launching mead in the US, and they are launching it with us.
Oh,
and
nice.
We have a mead with rose hips in it as one of the 3 things we've developed for them, because rose hips are super huge in Scandinavian culture. And when we started to develop it, it was fine, but it was in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
Everything that got a headline, such and such a country eats this, lowest COVID numbers, became a superfood. And when the Scandos were really good at, actually rolling out vaccines and doing all the things that were the reason that they had low COVID numbers, they were like, they're eating this one superfood, and it was rose hips, and the entire world supply disappeared. I kid you not. I was buying it 50-pound bags at a time, big sacks of it. I went to 4 importers. I went to the people that import from McCormick. Okay. McCormick Spices. And they were like, nope, world supply is out. No rose hips left. And I was like, oh no, I had finally done the thing. And then there's a cool new product where it's rose hips, but what they do is they flash freeze them, like a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And they come in, basically it's the fruit itself, because it's a fruiting body, not technically a fruit. I'm sure there's someone watching this today that'll be like, it's not even technically a fruit. But anyway, they take the fruit off of the seeds, and what you get is a granularized version of rose hips. And I phone call after phone call after phone call, I got in touch with the only people that can get them for me. So we have a rose hip mead coming out in 2 weeks, Steve.
Wow.
You won't have to dream anymore.
I can hang it up.
Yeah. Well, no, you could. I'll get you some. I can hook you up.
That would be awesome.
What I'm saying.
We like Ricky.
Yes, Nick, the Imperial Rose Brew is very much still in the works. That is why there hasn't been rose brew from us or imperial rose brew because we literally couldn't get the one ingredient that was required.
Wow.
Okay, Sam, our producer, says that that we're over an hour into the conversation.
Yes.
I mean, do we have a target for? I mean, I'm perfectly happy right now.
You're drinking
mead on an empty stomach. So
let's take a couple more questions and we'll let
before
yes.
I want to nail you down.
Oh, on the
Spritzer thing.
Yes,
that whole thing.
Okay.
Now. Concentrate, Ricky. Build some walls in your mind about.
You have no idea how many walls there are.
Talk to us about what the Spritzer is.
Okay.
What's in
so
it,
I did it,
how you make it,
okay.
Why is it delicious? I'm assuming
this is okay. True story.
Concentrate.
No. True story. This is the first time I've had it out of a can. Like I haven't even had it yet. We got it in cans. Obviously, I cracked cans coming through the line to figure out carb levels and all those other things, but I have not sat down and had one of these.
Concentrate, Ricky.
No, I'm telling you, I'm concentrated. This is outrageously good. I don't know if Sean is tuning into his own company's station right now, but you were right. You were 100% right. This is so utterly crushable that I feel bad that it's even 4% alcohol. Like I would drink this like seltzer, just like regular bottles of seltzer. So, okay. This is a Basic Brewing, Grunfell Meadery, open source collaboration. I'm going to tell you all, Sean calls it inside baseball, all the stuff behind the scenes.
That's what we're here for.
Cranberry, speaking of fruits that you can't get. So Nordic Farmhouse is one of our most popular meads, and Cranberry just went through the roof. I don't know if it's the vitamin C content and people still try to cure COVID by drinking cans of things rather than getting vaccines, but it's not, if you want to cure COVID, don't get it. But we had Cranberry, came from the cranberry harvest here in New England, and probably a combination in New England and Michigan, to be honest. But he had this idea that people coming to mead are going to come, if you read Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, or Beowulf, you already know about mead. You probably already know about Grunfell Meadery. But if you're just a drinker, what is your path to finding mead? You don't need to stay here, but just like a lot of us in the aughts discovered, not going to bash anyone that's based in my home state, but large cider producers. And then we learned what cider can be. And there are all these small craft folks. Shacksbury's right down the road from here. I think they're distributed about half the US now. They literally run the Lost Apple Project, where they go off and they find historical varietals of apples in the woods of New England, graft them and save these species, and then make cider out of them. Like, so cool. What an amazing story. And it's all true. And their ciders are out of this world. And that's how a lot of people. No.
Focus, Ricky.
No. Let me follow the arc. So what it is that a lot of people's path to good cider was through mass-produced cider. And again, not hating on anyone. If that's your thing, everyone comes to good drinks a different way. And all of us, I mean, you're drinking a 9%. When Steve's allowed to drink again, he'll be drinking a 9 to 12%. But I was so in this industry that the fact that all of our meads are like 7% and then go up from there, it didn't even occur to me that would be a turnoff for people. That there are people out there that just, if it's above 6, they don't want it. They're lightweights. And I was like, that's so important. That's why we have an internship program here, is because I'm always getting new ideas about what it's like in the wider world. As I said, I go to my house and I come back to work and I work on my little farm, and that is it. I have not been out to a restaurant in 7 months. I don't know what it's like out in the wilds, and my wilds are only a rural county in Vermont. So he came in, he's like, we make a product that's just not accessible to people. And if our mission is really inviting people to the feast, there's this whole population of people that just don't want a 7% beverage or a 12% beverage. And that's where this idea of Spritzer came from. Also, our friends at Shacksbury had I think this is in the 3s. I don't know if they still produce it, but they made an apple Spritzer. Same idea. Have that thing that you can sit around on a dock and not worry that your friend who's only used to large commercial beers is going to drink, because that's what happens with mead all the time. There's almost no feedback loop because it's so easy to drink that you could accidentally have 4 legal drinks and have no idea. So that's where the idea came from. And then Jess and Sam came up with this idea of doing always having 2 of them so that we can get real feedback, again, from the wider world. So there will always be an ingredient in common. So this time it's always going to be honey, but this time it was cranberry. There's cranberry apple, cranberry lime. And again, if this is inside baseball, I saw a thing from my assistant brewer where he said crapple and crime are fermenting really well in the tank. And I was like, I'm not. So I have Ricky's Brew Journal. One of the expurgated things, we've only expurgated 2 things. And one of them was that I had notes where I referred to these 2 products as crapple and crime. And Kelly was like, please don't. It'll be funny if you say it, but not if someone reads it. But so that was the idea behind it, is make something accessible.
Well, help me understand. So 2 things. One observation is there's a reason why light beer is the most popular style of beer in the world, if you want to call it a style, because people can drink it and they're not put off by it. So that's a great strategy. My question to you would be, help me as someone interested in coming to this mead. Tell me what the difference is between sparkling mead and Spritzer. What is? I mean, what is the? Why is that? Why is it not just sparkling mead? So, Mr. Meadmaker, tell me what the difference is.
I don't have the numbers because none of us is publicly traded, but the vast majority at this point of mead consumed in the United States is carbonated or sparkling.
Okay.
And so the number of products on the market is still. But of the actual percentage of meads consumed by the pint, by the gallon, huge percentage of it, probably over 80% at this point, is carbonated. And so what we have here is, if you've never had a craft mead and the word mead has some association in your brain, Kelly reworked our label. I don't think she even did a thing where it's white, so it looks super secret, but we started calling it Grunfell Secret Labs because we actually have products that don't even have honey in them that are fermenting in the back. Sam, sorry about that. They're just started. I'll tell you about them in a meeting later. Don't freak out.
But what makes it a Spritzer? Why is
what makes it a Spritzer?
What makes a Spritzer?
So it's not a seltzer. It does not start with white sugar fermented with quick yeast or tequila yeast. So the word Spritzer is of German origin by way of Yiddish, and it means to sparkle or shine. It is also like the word seltzer, which comes from regional word Seltzen. I believe Spritzer and spackle, like the stuff you use on your walls, are both eventually find their origin in Proto-Indo-European as the same base word. But yes, to sparkle or shine or burst out. So what makes this a Spritzer is we wanted to imply that it's going to be something that is nice for a brunch. It's not a breakfast mead. Breakfast mead is a very specific category with one thing in it, but that could define a set. I don't know if Kelly's watching. She's the mathematician. But so what makes it a Spritzer is it is cleaner than our other meads. And that's where I was going to give you the inside baseball. So Nordic Farmhouse and Spritzer start as the same ingredients, right down to the yeast. But if we have home brewers watching this, which I hope we do, this is one of my favorite things. As I said earlier, like there are lots of varietal folks out there that's their thing. They want to use a blueberry honey, a coffee honey, and go through all of them. And that's amazing. I'm a yeast guy, a fermentation temperature guy. I love starting with that same set of things and seeing what you can trick it out to do. So QA23 from Lalvin at high temperatures functions almost like a sour pitch. It brings out all these cool, funky, farmhousey flavors. I would not recommend it at mid 90s for a beer, though you could try it. You're a home brewer, do whatever you want. It would bring out probably too many esters. But with mead, your 90s of the fermentable is by weight, it's 98% sugars, and the remaining 2% are your primary metabolites. Whereas with grain, it's 80 and 18. So I used QA23 in Nordic at really high temperatures, which ferment. So a QA23 is a wine strain. I'm not going to guess from where, I'll forget. But it is super funky, high, super clean, low. So the thing that Sean, who came up with this, he tried the two of them, Grapple and Crime, side by side. And he's like, with all the things that are going on, knowing that it was the same, everything that went into Nordic, but fermented at a completely different temperature. Again, the recipes will be free on our website as soon as I get around to writing them. But I believe it was 96 for Nordic Fahrenheit and 68 for Spritzer.
Okay.
The honey explodes, like under all the color, everything. If you got the lime on the one, you got the apple really actually helps the honey. Apples have a lot of compounds in common. So vanilla, apples, and honey go together for a reason. Yes. And QA23 will ferment all the way down to 58 degrees.
I really
like go lower, but yeah.
Yeah, I really like QA23. I got to where I used it a lot. I think it's Portuguese white wine yeast, I believe.
That sounds right.
Yeah. But back to my what's a Spritzer. Yeah. When I think of a Spritzer, I think of it as we're going to have wine Spritzers, and I think of it as blending some wine with sparkling water.
So that use of the word Spritzer is about 50 something years old. It arises in central New York amongst Jewish camps. And you are correct. That is the most commonly used. It's not a seltzer, and Spritzer was the next word we thought of.
Okay.
It's not a cocktail.
It's not a blend.
That's what I'm saying. A ready to drink cocktail.
That's what I was getting at. So if I knew nothing about it, if I'm somebody living in Manhattan and I'm like, oh, it's a Spritzer, then my assumption might be that you took say a strong mead and you toned it down alcoholically with sparkling water, club soda.
This is fermented to be perceived that way. So if someone told me that this was Bragi from us with like a 1-to-3 ratio of Bragi to seltzer, I would believe it. So the carb level is higher. So this is 2.85 volumes for those taking notes at home versus our normal meads, which are in the like 2-3 region. Doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it is.
Oh yeah.
That's a Doppler thing.
Yeah.
So it's, as I said, I didn't do the marketing. Kelly, my wife and the CEO, made these amazing, amazing labels. So these are actually labels on those cans.
Oh, nice. Wow.
And so if you work on a canning line, if anyone here is a commercial brewer, you have a labeler, and you know how your labeler misses labels sometimes. Can you imagine how hard it was for us to tell at a can a second whether this was a blank can? This is not a blank.
For those that may be listening, the label is metallic. Yes. The can is metallic.
Yes, it was amazing. I got to give Jake, we missed out of, it was a small batch. So it was only like 800 gallons. He only missed one can out of that entire thing, of the 3,600 cans that came through.
Wow.
So is it, I mean, we said earlier that it's very tricky to ferment a low gravity mead, and it's not something that you would advise for novices to do.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the process. I mean, what gravity did you start at? when did you add the fruit? Walk us through the technical aspects of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll finish with this so you two can go about your lunch, and I probably need to put my children down for a nap. But
I might have to go down for a nap as well.
But Steve will sing to you and drum. You're a drummer, right, Steve? Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we are asking the gravity question because we adjust gravity throughout fermentation. So don't try this if you're a beer brewer. If you can figure out why the slow addition of water with the entrained dissolved oxygen screws up beer, but can improve a mead, there may be a Nobel or at least a Mondavi Institute award waiting for you. No one knows why. We've researched it for 15 years now and can't really grab a handle on it. But so we will actually start at a slightly higher fermentation so that we know that we're hitting the exact final gravity we want. It started with cranberry, honey, water, nutrient, QA23. Then it was fermented for us cold. 68 is really normal for most mead making, but that's cold for our facility. And because this was a new product, we sampled every single day and were able to adjust the temperature up and down to bring out that honey character. And then on transfer, yeast got stirred back up into solution and everyone was like, oh no, we've ruined it. We do this every time. It's been a decade now. Every time we transfer, we're like, oh, it tastes like bread. Nope. Heck. But so we then added, that's when the apple and lime went into two separate tanks. So it started as the same base. And that's our idea is we want to choose your own adventure. So eventually this is going to be something we produce all the time. Spoiler, the next one has blood orange in it. So in-house, so what we do is in-house, we pick the ingredient that we want to play with and then design two versions of it. So then it fermented and so we would have been starting gravity would have been about 1038. It ended at 994. So good job, QA23. That means that we have an apparent attenuation of 132%. Wow. As in, we fermented, apparent attenuation means we fermented more sugar than is in there. Our actual attenuation was just like a percentage point from what yeast can physically do. And yet, because it's, especially the apple one, because honey and apple both have those flavor compounds, this isn't like puckeringly dry. It's super, I could drink 3 or 4 of these in a row. But the third one, I would wander into my house, grab some gin and a lime and doctor it. But that's me. Like, that's not the beverage's fault. I would just last week is when I had Nordic Farmhouse all by itself out of a can for the first time without messing around with it in my home bar in like a year and a half. Everyone's got to have a hobby.
So cranberry's tart.
Yes. Fermentation temperature. Hold on. I can pull it up on my brew monitor. If anyone is a commercial brewer here and you don't have brew monitor, you need to get one. It is like 3 assistant brewers in a single little box. So
my question is, yes. Since cranberry is tart and leans toward the astringent, how can you get away with such a dry fermented beverage at such a low alcohol point and not just like pucker the heck out of, not just have it astringent and puckery and unpleasant?
I assume that there is some random Norse god that looks over this facility. So I just pulled it up. Our current fermentation of one of these is 3.22 pH, which is so low that the yeast isn't supposed to be working. And I am dropping a gravity point every 20 minutes. Wow. So, yep. So clearly I assume it's either Krasier or Bragi is just watching over the facility and making microscopic mythical tweaks.
Well, that's the Nordic god Pukey. He's the cousin of Loki.
Yes. Loki is an interesting character. You do know that my actual degree work is in pre-Christian traditions of Scandinavia, better known as Norse mythology. So with that, before we go, Steve and I start talking peppers or Norse gods.
Norse gods.
But no, it's so the real answer to your question is QA23 and nutrient together. So using a good nutrient. When I say a good nutrient, I can tell you what we use. We use Yeast Nutrient Blend. A complex nutrient blend. Don't have to use them. They're amazing. They're great people to work with. But having a nutrient blend that does more than just support yeast health, but actually gives you what would traditionally be called brewing salts, gives you a mellower. So it's not actually a pH shift. If you've ever used actual difference between club soda and soda water is just that little bit of baking soda and a few other salts, and it will mellow out a drink. It's a completely different drink, especially if you've ever been to England, where there's a stronger set of salts than ours.
So it's essentially water chemistry.
And that's the biggest difference. And that's what I really try to push on our site is get a nutrient that that you can work with to round out that beverage. And I think that's honestly, I got to thank the folks at Yeast that I think that's why this ended up so smooth and clear and all of that. And apparently QA23 flocculates at low temperatures and stays hazy at high temperatures. You learn something new every day.
Huh.
Yeah. So flocculation is also a function of temperature and time and recirculation and all sorts of things. And I just hoped that it worked. Anyone else who is a small business owner, that is what companies run on. Hope.
That's for sure.
Well, shall we knock out the remaining? Sam said there are a handful of questions.
Okay.
Pertinent question. We knock those out and
let's do it. Let's set ourselves 4 minutes and we'll answer them
I'm
all.
sampling I'm sampling my Christmas Day kettle sour that the fans of the podcast will
and staff that worried that I'd crack this. I don't have a bottle opener. I forgot to bring one in with me, so it
remains uncracked.
Hi, Steve. Say hi to the boys for me. There have been any thoughts of alternating the hops used in Hop Swarm for a spin-off mead creation like Maple Root of All Evil? We are actually in the process of developing Hop Swarm. It's our hopped mead where every single version is either a collaboration with the local brewery or has another ingredient. I can tell you what the first one is. It is I bet I have a can because it's Mama's favorite. Yep. I'm in her floating office, and sure enough, there's a can in here. So
Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy,
right? So Kelly likes Hop Swarm so much that when she was pregnant both times with our kids, we had to adjust the amount of Hop Swarm we made in the facility because we were accounting for her love of the product. But the version that we've been working on, his little Badoom, as my daughter would say, is going to be an orange, and we're going to be doing dried orange peel in with our hop blend. And this is what I've always wanted Hop Swarm to be. Each one just like a slight, because I tweak it every time because it's Kelly's favorite, and I'm always trying to dial in like a home brewer on exactly what she wants. Or what she wants, but our customers will enjoy, because we had a version that actually poured green on the tap because of the amount of hops we put in, and Kelly and I loved it, and that did not work for customers. So, but yes, we are working on every single batch starting in the new year. Will be a really intentional big tweak on. So like orange peel is our first, and then after that, we're just going to be gathering suggestions.
Wow.
Hi, Kyle. Ooh.
That's a typo. Talker.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, Kyle, because you have to correct this one. You have to read ahead. Kyle Descharme asks, what are some of the yeast strains used in the ancient collection? What is the typical turnaround time from
Batch.
We just do batch the bottle. Yep, just a small typo bottle for those bigger meads. So that's a great question and something that, okay, from pitch to fermentation completion. So we're talking here 14 to 17% alcohol is, I'm gonna say it out loud, 2 weeks.
Wow.
We can hit 16% alcohol in 2 weeks. And that is not something that I recommend for homebrewers trying. And the reason is we are in here. Sure, you can sample your mead every single day and if you can make microscopic, like 1 degree Fahrenheit degree changes, and you know your yeast that well, please take it on as a sport. I used to do backroads racing, and it's just as harrowing as this. But
Ricky's done everything.
I've done so little that this world has to offer. But we are able to control down to the decimal degree. We just do whole degree. But I know this yeast strain so well that if you do a strong mead too clean, you end up with that sort of mock Chardonnay that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it too gamey, you end up with fusels and a lot of other things. So our active fermentation time, which if you look at a lot of wineries, 2 weeks is not unreasonable for active fermentation. Mm-hmm. It's just outside of what most people think when they're mead makers. But we're about 2 weeks on the active fermentation, and then comes the daily tests and the checking. And that last 1% of alcohol, so our last 8 gravity points, can be anywhere from, in one case, it was literally 24 more hours and it was done. But I have ones in the back that are, I think, 4 weeks, maybe one gravity point a day if I'm lucky. Just, you don't even see active fermentation unless you're staring at it like an overprotective parent, which is what all pro brewers are. So the things that I was talking about earlier, like our new Café ML, those are going to be 3 to 4 months between fermentation and completion. And that also includes 3 different yeast strain additions timed based on flavor. So for more on that, I should probably write an article.
Now, I have a question. As a home mead maker, whenever you add, like if you're doing staggering nutrient additions, you have to be careful, because when you add them to an active fermentation, you could have a geyser because of the amount of CO2 in solution. Our solution is to swirl the fermenter and all the most of the CO2 comes out of it. As a professional mead maker, how do you deal with degassing?
This is a great question. We have
I'm a professional.
You're literally a professional question asker. It's like Brett McKay from Art of Manliness. I was just like, he's a great writer, but also like, you get paid to ask good questions. That's so cool.
Then I derailed you, so that's unprofessional.
No. We use a continuous pump over system, which I learned from our friends down in Maryland at Charm City Mead Works. Again, that's the dissolved oxygen issue. Hopefully with triclam fittings and sanitary fittings, there's no air entrainment, but a beer brewer would, I don't think, ever risk this. We pull mead from the bottom of our tanks, our conicals, and it pumps up continuously for the first 90% of active fermentation.
Oh, wow.
So early on, what we'd do is we only had one brew house pump, and we would move it first thing in the morning. And talk about a geyser. There is a thing we tell all interns and brew house employees on their first day. This is a meadery. You will get sticky. Because we did a pump over.
I've heard that before at other jobs.
Slow down. It's a family show.
We did a continuous pump over. And so we just, before the continuous, we hit it. And I had a batch explode out of the top. And I went to our 6-inch port and had to push the geyser, which was full of ginger in it. Also, you never got burned until you got a fresh ginger burn in your face. But I pushed the geyser back down. It was shooting out in all directions. So I held it in place. And my assistant brewer at the time, Mickey, had a second job, and she was like, I have to go to my other job at the college. And I don't remember this, yelled down with no obscenity, which is pretty impressive. It's a meadery. You will get sticky. And we had two bartenders who just like one of them doubled in half laughing, like watching me push this foamy mass down. So that is part of the reason that we do continuous pump overs is pH is one of the highest limiting factors for mead fermentations. So if you were a beer, again, those CO2 helps keep your beer safe from pathogens. But as I said, I'm on a batch that's 3.22, and that's on continuous pump over. So the CO2, the dissolved CO2, and the acid that produces is not required to keep our batches safe. So now we're keeping our yeast up in solution where it has more contact with the sugars. We're not getting layering, which is very common when you're working with viscous solutions like honey or fruit juices. They can sink to the bottom. So that's how we do that. And then,
is it similar? Is it similar to a stir plate? If you're making a starter,
yep, exactly.
You do the stir plate because one of the functions is to keep the yeast in suspension. The other is to knock out the CO2 as it's going through.
That is exactly what it is.
That's That's probably another key to how you keep healthy, continuous fermentations in your products. Is that you're moving this stuff around.
But I learned from
the whole time and knocking out that CO2 at the same time.
But the biggest thing I learned from Cody, who is now off starting a really cool company. He's so close. I will announce on our website when Cody has his own company. He's starting a cool seltzer company here in Vermont. But we had a stalled fermentation. We went through all the things, and turns out the cause of the yeast health issue was a lack of oxygen. But the continuous fermentation was actually stripping the cell membrane because of the hit from that pump over time. We were killing the yeast. So it's a mixed bag when you do that. So he was the one that tracked it down for us. He was like, I think we're hurting the yeast. I was like, they're so tiny. The plates huge.
Bashing the cells.
But we were literally hurting the membranes. So if you're going to try to do something like that, what I used to do when I was a homebrewer was I put my toe on the edge of the cardboard and shake it back and forth. And I was like, how do you do that? I can't shake 2,000 gallons.
Right.
So that's how we do it.
Yeah.
And all thanks to my friends at Charm City. And Kelly says we gotta go. That is my wife and my boss, and I need to go put my daughter to bed.
Kelly, we love you.
You are fabulous, and I will send all those recipes over, and you're going to send us the Turkish Delight or the Sultan's
Sultan's.
Yeah, Sultan's Delight.
Sultan's Delight. Yeah. And we are I'm going to share equally with Steve the box of meads that I'm hoping have not been consumed by a delivery driver on the side of the road somewhere. And I'm sure that we'll be discussing those and we'll be inspired to do our own recipes. And so this has been so much fun. I got to admit, I was nervous because we don't do live stuff mainly because we're old and a lot of the references that we use are would get us canceled nowadays because they're from like the 70s and the 60s. And we call Steve Mr. Non Sequitur. But it's been so fun because I feel like I've been just relaxing and drinking mead and a kettle sour beer with friends, and
that's what the mead making community should always be.
Yeah,
we are here to support the feast.
So I hope that the viewers have been as entertained as I have been, talking about getting into the weeds sometimes about our favorite beverages, and Steve, have you had fun?
I've had a great time. Absolutely.
We'll drink together soon, Steve. I'm going to go put my daughter to nap.
It's tough being the designated talker.
If I could get a job as designated talker, I will have achieved my life's purpose.
I mean, I didn't get to sample anything today, so I get a do-over.
Yeah, next time we'll trade places.
Yeah,
and I'll drive for lunch.
There you go.
All right. Thanks
you
for
guys
the
soon.
opportunity, Ricky, and give our love to
pleasure.
Kelly and the
Absolutely.
kids and Sam. Thanks for writing Shepherd over the whole thing, and Jess and everybody at Groenfell and we appreciate your support for the podcast, obviously. But even if you weren't supporters of the podcast financially, we would still love you and I would still talk about you. But maybe I shouldn't say that. But thanks to everybody for watching, and thanks to Steve for coming over. And I'm going to buy him lunch.
He deserves it.
And
I'll talk to you guys soon.
This was so much fun. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Much love. See ya.